So I was taking a hike this summer during a family reunion that was part of a reunion that had 55 relatives, and I usually don't hike alone up there, but I think I had a moment where I wanted to escape for 3 or 4 hours from 55 relatives, and I was going up a steep, what was the steep trail for me, and I got to the very top in this meadow of wildflowers and a beautiful vista of mountains across a valley, and I ran into a couple from Los Angeles, and I didn't know them, and they asked me what I did, and I told them about First Beverage, investing in emerging brands, and they asked me a question that I've been asked for the past 3 to 4 months, and it was, is First Beverage an investor in White Claw? And I laughed and told them that White Claw is owned by the company that owns Mike's Hard Lemonade, and they haven't needed a small investment for a long time. But as I wound my way down the trail, I started to think about why has this been the summer dominated by seltzers, and why so much explosive growth in this emerging brand. And then I also thought about why are people surprised by this segment coming out of nowhere, because if you lined up all the criteria of the next product that would disrupt the already ailing beer industry, you'd probably think about putting some booze in a LaCroix can and thinking about something that's flavor forward and would appeal to women and something that swims under the health and wellness halo. And then I really thought about why did these two companies, Truly owned by Boston Beer and White Claw owned by Mark Anthony Brands and Mike's Hard Lemonade, why did those two break out so much so early to now own about 85% of this quick growing and very large category? At the same time, that same afternoon when I got back from my hike, I was reading a book on this vacation called Range by David Epstein that makes the argument that it's generalists, not specialists, that can triumph and succeed in this less predictable, highly competitive, more complicated world that we're all living in. So I started to think about, as I thought about generalists and specialists, and I was winding my way down the trail, I thought about the two men behind these two brands, Anthony von Mandl and Jim Koch. Anthony von Mandl started as a consultant. He then went on to be a wine merchant. He bought a failing winery in Western Canada and then turned to the company that became Mike's Hard Lemonade. Jim Koch, as many of you know, started out for 6 years as a guide for Outward Bound. Then he spent 5 years as a consultant with Boston Consulting Group and then went on, much against the wishes of his dad, who was a brewer at Anheuser-Busch, and started Sam Adams and Boston Beer Company. And I thought it was interesting that they were both consultants. They both had what David Epstein referred to as sampling periods in their career, where they did very diverse things before they launched and found their sweet spot in the beverage industry. And both had already launched highly disruptive brands already in the U.S. beer industry. Anthony von Mandl with Mike's Hard Lemonade, and Jim Koch with just Twisted Tea and Angry Orchard cider. So then I started thinking about all the other people in the beverage industry that have had very diverse experiences. And I thought about the New Belgium Brewing Board. When I joined there, the board was made up of a lot of the top senior executives that had made this brewery so successful. And they included a social worker, a landscaper, a seller of organic vegetables and a river guide, Greg Owsley, who's here, a shepherdess, a bartender, and then someone like Christine Parrott, who came from a slightly more traditional background, a public accountant and auditor. But I was thinking about how that incredibly diverse group of people who came from those jobs, shepherdess, river guide, bartender, all coming in and then leading really important divisions of this brewery that eventually at its peak became the #3 craft brewery. I also thought about First Beverage's longtime board member, Pat Hayden, who, after being a successful USC quarterback, went on and spent time at Oxford for his Rhodes Scholarship to study English literature, went into the NFL, but then during his off seasons, he studied at law school and became a lawyer after his NFL career, and then went on to have a stellar career in private equity. And then as I was preparing today, I thought about all the people in this room who have also had those sampling periods in their backgrounds, who have built up really broad and diverse experience before finding their sweet spots. So range really not only talks about the interesting differences between generalists and specialists, but what I found interesting is he talks about the differences between kind and unkind, or what Epstein calls wicked learning environments. And kind environments are where the rules are known, where the playing field is very defined. And those are areas where specialists do incredibly well. But in unkind learning environments, the rules are constantly changing. The whole game is less predictable. And those are areas where generalists, according to Epstein, do much better. And he starts off with this incredibly interesting, I found, description of the differences between the tennis star Roger Federer and the golf star Tiger Woods. And anybody who follows golf knows that Tiger is and was a specialist. His father pushed him into golf before the age of 2. He was hitting a golf ball on national TV with Bob Hope before he was 3. He was always playing up age divisions because he was so much superior to his peers. And golf, according to Epstein, is the perfect kind environment. It's where deliberate and repetitive practice pays off. The patterns repeat, the challenges and solutions repeat. Roger Federer, on the other hand, was completely different. His parents actually didn't want him to play tennis. His mom was a tennis instructor, and she wanted to pull him away from tennis and make sure he was getting exposure to other sports. Roger Federer also didn't want to play up in age divisions in tennis as he got better and better because he wanted to hang out with his buddies and talk about music and other sports after tennis practice was over. But tennis is a more dynamic sport, and it played well for a generalist. It's a game where the ball coming at you from your opponent is always different. And if you're a good doubles player, as Federer is, you also have to react to the human behaviors and less predictability of your partner. So he goes on, Epstein goes on to make that point in examples like that over and over again, that it's people with broad and diverse experience who have worked hard in their careers to be open to new and different ideas that succeed better in this more unpredictable, highly competitive world where the rules are changing, where the ball coming at all of us is a little bit different each time. And he does debunk the myth that the more competitive and complicated the world becomes, the more specialized we should become, the more we should jump into a specialty even earlier. He actually argues just the opposite, that the more complicated this world is, the more we have to go out and seek broad and diverse experiences and make sure we're hiring people that have broad and diverse experiences. I keep thinking back on that New Belgium board with a wildly diverse team that created a very successful brewery. And then I just kept coming back to the idea of this kind versus wicked learning environments. And I couldn't help but think that the beverage world, and I would think most of you might agree, other CPG categories have become wicked and unkind for a long time because the rules have been changing so much. The routes to market, the changing consumer preferences, the attacks that big CPG, mainstream, not so good for you in many ways, larger brands are feeling from smaller brands. The changes in the distribution model, all the changes brought by Amazon. The beverage world isn't kind anymore, and it's not going to be. And I think people who think that old patterns are going to repeat are maybe playing a Follies game. So for me, it's an important time to be looking at the Jim Cooks and the Anthony Von Mandels of the world and think about how they got so far ahead. And then luckily today, we're going to hear from a number of speakers who are going to be other examples of bringing in their diverse experiences to address the changes that we're all encountering in all of the different industry segments we have today. Epstein keeps making this point that modern life, and I would say CPG life, requires range. It requires that ability to make connections between far-flung domains and far-flung ideas. And he uses a phrase from a consultant that he doesn't name, but I love it for one of our taglines for today, and that is, it's so important to live our lives with one foot outside our own world, to make sure that we're stepping out of our safe silos and safe specialties to make sure we're getting experience from others. And he does make the point that I think is important, is that none of us in these areas are living on a 6-lane, single-lane dirt road. In fact, the world's now become an 8-lane highway, and we need to jump in and ride it. And I love this quote in particular from David Epstein, and I think it applies to our personal lives as well as our business lives, and that is, being stuck in a single domain not only limits our lives, but it really restricts it. But it also, importantly, I think, can prove harmful to our business plans if we're not, at times, stepping out of it. So I want to get back to thanking all of you for being here. I know this is a hard chart for many of you to see in the background, but it really explains the diversity of the group that we have here today, which is really the point of Blue Box. It's selfish on the part of those of us at First Beverage to want to interact with people from other segments and learn from it. And it's really our chance to step outside of our world and hear from a lot of different voices who can bring in diverse and broad-based ideas. So thank you again for being here.